I thought my granny's house was boring, until I met her hot caretaker. Nothing in my life was going as I had planned. First, Dad decided my fate, and now I'd done everything possible in my nature to ruin it all further. Yes, I might have been drunk, but I could have somehow not whined about my Nana in front of a darn stranger. It all started on that one fateful day. Getting caught kissing the priest's daughter by my dad was not on my wish list, but there was something else that shouldn't have belonged to my wish list but did, feeling nothing after kissing her. I remembered holding on to her and trying desperately to feel something or anything that my friends from high school boasted about and coming up with nothing. It was almost like her touch didn't excite me. I was disappointed. But no one was as disappointed as my dad. He screeched at both of us and asked the teary-eyed girl to leave immediately before he dragged me away with a painful grip on my shoulder. "For God's sake, tell me," he had barked. "You didn't push yourself on her." "I didn't." I had been more upset about the fact that he thought so lowly of me than what he could be planning to do to deal with me. "It was consensual. She kept passing me glances, and I..."
"Don't blame it on her."
"I am not blaming it on her." It was half her fault and half mine. It was true that it started when she kept stealing glances at me and joked about how stupidly short I was. Then we talked, and the idea of kissing just happened to pop into our heads. It was entirely another thing that I didn't feel a single thing, so it was all for naught. "You're going to get punished for this, boy." "Dad, please." I tried to hold on to his hand. I was his only son, and whining almost always worked on him. "I'll try to be a good son from now on. I will repent for my sins. I'll go to church every day now." Nothing in his expression made him look compassionate to my case at that moment. I didn't think telling him about feeling nothing after kissing her would help my case. I kept my mouth shut, and he gave me a verdict. I was to spend the entire summer with my Nana. That was the most heartless thing he could do. When the night fell, he ordered me to pack my bags before going to bed. When he didn't give me a chance to speak, I knew my future was decided. Mom didn't say a word, and there went all my hopes. When Dad dropped me off in front of my Nana's place, I looked up at him and spoke in a very devastating tone. "My life is a perfect graveyard of buried hopes." He rolled his eyes and asked me to stop being so dramatic. I huffed and carried my bags into the house as my dad greeted his mother. When he left, I carried myself into the bedroom and locked the door. When the night fell and I was sure my Nana was asleep, I quietly dragged myself out of there and looked for that local bar that I'd seen ages ago. It was still there. I walked in there and was happy to find that the chaos in my head matched the chaos in the bar. And that was how I found myself heavily leaning against a handsome but hot stranger and whining to him about my Nana and Dad. He didn't entirely look entertained by my line of conversation, but stayed beside me anyway. When I asked him why, he told me that this wasn't the safest place to be drunk at. In response, I further leaned heavily against him and said, "I'm sure you will rescue me, my knight in shining armor." I wanted to say that I would never say such cringy things sober. Never. But I was drunk, and I believed that was an excuse enough. Even drunk, however, I couldn't deny the sparks that I felt each time he touched me. It was almost like I was the most touch-starved person to ever exist on this planet, and these things made it look like everything was working fine. So one could only imagine my shock when I woke up the next day to find the same hot stranger sitting by my Nana and talking to her in a hushed voice. "What the fuck?" I muttered, and rubbed both my hands over my head. I hated having a hangover. It was the worst thing about drinking. "Mind your manners, Simon," my Nana warned in a frail voice. But despite the softness in her voice, that old sternness was hard to miss. "You're so unlike your dad. He has never touched a glass of drink, and here you are, acting as if your life depends on it." Yeah. I pointed at the hot stranger sitting by her side and tried my best to not show how attractive I found him. "Who's that hot guy?" Was I still drunk? I wondered. Who asked about a stranger like that? Where was my self-respect? My dignity? "That's my caretaker, Simon. Logan's his name." But I wasn't worried about that. I was worried about the very glaring fact that he could very easily go ahead and tell my Nana about everything that I had muttered last night. And as boring as I found my Nana's place, I didn't want her to get hurt by my stupid words. I already had a headache, but with my desperate attempts to separate them, I must have come out more whiny and annoying than usual. Logan, probably annoyed, excused us and dragged me into the kitchen. "I will not tell her anything," he said. Thank you?" He reached for something behind me on the shelf. "Here," he said, and gave me a blister pack. "It'll help with the hangover." "Why do you have it here?" I couldn't help but gasp. Was he giving my Nana drinks? "Is my Nana safe with you?" He narrowed his eyes on me. "She's safer with me than you, I can tell that much." And by the time I called my mom, I believed him. Sometime later, "Mom, is he trustworthy?" I had begun my conversation thus. "Who are you talking about, Simon?" "That guy Logan. Nana says he's her caretaker, but he keeps pills with him, Mom. Hangover pills." I had mentioned that particular point to bring to attention that maybe Logan wasn't a safe option for Nana, but in my hurry, I didn't realize that also gave her a perfect opening to ask questions that I really didn't want to answer anytime soon. "How do you know there was one? Did you need one, Simon? Have you started drinking?" "Oh, no, Mom." My voice wavered with each word that I said. If I displeased her any more than I'd already done in the past 1 week, she was sure to give me a bigger punishment. "I do not drink." I knew I didn't sound convincing. "I am going to talk to your Nana, but you do not need to worry about your Nana or Logan. Logan's a nice and trustworthy guy." I tried to distract her. "Has he lived here for long, Mom? Maybe I can make him my friend." She huffed on the other line. "He's been living there since his childhood. He belongs to that soil, that child. But Simon, I am going to talk to your Nana about this whether you like it or not." "Mom," I begged, but it was too late. She had hung up. I dropped dead on the bed and didn't get up for an hour. When I walked into the living area where I'd last seen Nana, I found her watching some drama. Logan was nowhere to be seen, though I could hear some sounds from the backyard. I sat beside my Nana, and when she moved to hug me, I hugged her back. "I didn't tell your mom anything," she said. "You're the best, Nana. Keep telling me that, Simon, and I might give you something sweet." "Your handmade vanilla ice cream?" I perked up and looked at her. "Unfortunately, my old hands can't do that anymore, Simon. But I managed to make something else for you." And it was then that she handed me a soft crochet top, and it was not usually what I wore, but when she insisted I wear it, I wore it. In her happiness, an emotion that I couldn't help but mirror, she asked Logan to take pictures of us. The next few minutes passed in utter embarrassment. I couldn't look into his eyes. When the evening finally fell, Logan told me that since Nana had me now, he didn't need to check in on her as frequently during the nights. Then, he told me a bunch of things that he said I needed to be aware of. It included her medicine and anything else she might need. Nana was in her bed when we were having this conversation, so I couldn't hold myself back from saying, "I don't hate my Nana, you know." I wasn't sure why I'd said it, but the words were out, and I was glad that I'd finally defended myself. "I can see," Logan replied and picked up his bag. "Are you leaving?" I asked. He shrugged. "It's late at night. I have to sleep." I gave him my hand for a handshake. "Nice to meet you, Logan." He took my hand in his own, and some primal part of me couldn't help but immediately draw my attention toward the size difference in our hands and the kind of amazing spark that I immediately felt at his touch. It was even more absurd because I hadn't ever done that or felt that. Besides, wasn't Logan like 50 years older than me? Logan furrowed his eyebrows. "I am 22, he muttered. "Oh," I'd said that aloud. "I am sorry." He took his hand back and nodded at me. "Good night, Simon." He'd turned around by now. I looked at my hand and morosely muttered, "Good night, Logan." A few days later, "Logan is a nice boy," my Nana was saying. "You must befriend him." In the last few days, I'd interacted only a few times with him. Each time, I'd either tried to get him to touch me or tried to bring his attention to the fact that I wasn't some annoying prick who hated his own Nana. But Logan mostly seemed uninterested. It was heartbreaking. "And stop being funny around him," she said. I removed my eyes from Logan. He had been working in Nana's garden for an hour now, and I had been watching him through the window for almost the same time. This was the most entertained I felt in days. "What's that supposed to mean?" I turned to her.
You kids act like we are foolish and don't understand anything.
Nana, I said. I seriously don't know what you're talking about.
Logan is a nice boy. He is handsome, kind, and smart.
When I said okay, I dragged the hell out of that word. So? She had a twinkle in her eyes.
Exactly.
Old people really did believe they were the funniest people on the planet. In the evening, she suggested I take a look around the town with Logan. Logan had been leaning against his bike by now, and at Nana's insistence, he looked at me in a particularly strange way. I didn't know if he wanted me to say no to the suggestion or what, so I kept my mouth shut. He sighed when Nana waved us away. I am feeling tired anyway, I said. I can go back. I don't think your granny will appreciate that, Logan muttered and gave me his helmet. I have only one, so we will not travel far on bike. We can walk. Is that okay? Of course, yes. The helmet was a little big on my head, so I had to constantly push it back. I sat behind him and heard the roaring of the engine long before I was actually ready for it. I heard my Nana screaming by at me at the same time I screamed in surprise. There was no way Logan wasn't having fun. When we finally stopped by a peaceful place and I got off that darn bike, my legs were shaking. It was almost like I hadn't ever been on a bike. Did you like it? Logan asked. Fuck you. Logan laughed and then stood a little closer. I'll help you, he said, and pulled the helmet off my head in one gentle sweep. His fingers touched my face again, and I felt that same spark that I often felt with him. My face was flaming red when he finally pulled away. Where are we going? It was past 8, and the day was slowly coming to a stop here. I couldn't imagine this in a city. In a way, this was fascinating. Just strolling, he answered. Sorry, cannot take you anywhere. Got something at home. That's all right. I do not want to be a bother. You're not a bother, Simon, he muttered and walked along with me. We had a bad start, but most people do. I'm sure you love your Nana. I do, I just hate being here. In the town? I couldn't help but nod my head. It's boring, you have to admit. He made a tisk sound. To me, it's not. He pointed at the sky. Look up. They're called stars. Feel the air? It's called fresh air. I rolled my eyes. Real snarky. But he was right. When he pointed out the most basic things, I couldn't help but think that these were indeed some subtle changes from the city. The world around here was so quiet. For a moment, it almost felt like we were the only two people around this part of the world. It was both jarring and beautiful. Your granny told me this was your punishment. I slowly nodded, a little embarrassed now. Why did she have to share that with him? Dad decided this would be the best way to remind me of manners. Logan laughed. What did you do? I blushed and rubbed my nape. I kissed a girl. He squinted his eyes at me. A priest's daughter. What the hell? Really? I nodded, a little ashamed. Dad caught us in the act, and he decided this was the best way to teach me a lesson. Funny. I kept the other important part of that kiss to me. Even though I felt strangely attracted to him, I didn't want to say something out of the line that had put tension between us. Well, now I am here. It's not all bad, Simon. I promise. I looked at him and immediately thought that he had that classical beauty kind of vibe about him. I can tell that much. He smiled. This way. A few days later. Nana was ready to take a nap, and I was sitting by her side when I said the words that I believed I shouldn't have. I like it when Logan touches me, I declared. Nana looked at me with her sleepy and tired eyes. I immediately felt guilty about disturbing her. Did he do something? No, he didn't do anything, I said immediately. I just like it when he touches me. She was now wide awake. What happened, Simon? I grabbed her old, wrinkly hand between my hands. When I kissed Anna, that priest's daughter, I didn't feel anything, Nana. Like, nothing at all. It just felt like a kiss, and not what I know I should feel. But when Logan touches me, it just feels very strange. I told her about the time when our shoulders touched for the slightest of seconds, and it felt like I was set on fire. or that time when he'd stood behind me to grab something off the shelf 2 days ago when he was teaching me to cook for Nana. It felt like if he kissed me, I'd kiss him back.
It reminds me of that time,
she began.
There was this girl I knew when I was younger.
Oh, Nana, I said, because I wasn't sure what to say. I cannot imagine you as a young lady. If she was sitting up, she would have shoved me away.
There was this girl, Simon. I often felt these tingly feelings with girls, but it wasn't until I met her that it got a little too intense for me. Whenever she touched me, it felt like I was set on fire, and it didn't happen once, but a bunch of times. She didn't feel that, and we pretty much moved on with our husbands. But that doesn't mean I have forgotten what it feels like. Maybe it's the same, Simon.
After all that, you married Grandpa. She lay more comfortably on the bed.
Yes, I did, but I loved him.
Of course you did. I didn't know what to feel after what she'd said, but when I saw Logan in the evening on the same day struggling to open or close a shop door, I couldn't help the smile that spread on my lips. Suddenly, what Nana had said made sense to me. I approached Logan with a smile and asked him if he needed help. Logan said that he didn't, but I could see he was struggling with the wooden box in his hands. I again said that I could help him with either, and when he realized that he really could use some help, he handed me the keys and asked me to lock the door. It was a bakery. I looked at him and asked him if he ran the shop.
My, granny taught me to bake. It was her shop. Well, when she was alive and kicking.
Oh, I replied. Sorry.
Nah, it's fine.
He looked around us and at the empty roads.
What are you doing out here so late?
I thought I needed some fresh air. It was almost a lie. I had come out of the house to look for Logan. Do you want some help with that?
No, thanks.
And that was the essence of our conversation for the most part. Eventually, I asked Logan about the lake and if he knew how to swim. He laughed as if he couldn't believe I'd asked such a question.
Of course I know. I have spent my summers there.
I don't know how to swim, I said. Logan stopped for a moment before he finally spoke.
So, you want me to teach you?
You're so perceptive. And that was how the swimming lessons began. During one of these afternoons, I informed him about the tired state of my Nana. I had been in the town for over 3 weeks by then, and she didn't look like she was getting any better. Most nights, I'd hear her cough. Although Logan had already told me how to deal with that, it still didn't make it easy to see her so out of breath.
She had a very bad cold some weeks before you came. I think I've informed your parents about it. It's worrying me, too, that it's taking her so long to recover.
Did you bring her to the doctor? Like, actual doctor. He leaned against the tree, and I watched him stand perfectly still for a while before he turned to me.
I did, of course. Then your dad came to visit, and he took her to the hospital too. He just said, some things.
What did he say? I was curious, but also worried. Logan's expression seemed ominous. I was worried that he'd say something that I didn't want to hear. No, don't tell me. I'll ask my parents. I put my feet in the cool water again. I could hear children and adults squealing in the background. Logan had brought us somewhere quieter. It felt more peaceful here. I was glad he knew of this place.
I think I am ready for a lap.
I don't think you are, he said, and pulled himself away from the tree and came close to me.
The flow is heavier on that side. It'll bring you away.
He pointed to the closest points.
You can swim on these sides. That should do well.
Even though he looked encouraging, I couldn't deny the fact that something had brought down his mood. He looked strangely out of his wits, and there was a shadow on his face that I hadn't ever seen before.
Okay,
I told him, and observed his distracted self for the rest of our stay in that part of the town. In the past few weeks, Nana and I had come really close. Although her place still seemed boring, I couldn't deny the charming air about it. What was better than playing board games with Nana and spending the other part of the day hanging out with Logan either in his bakery or anywhere in the town? One day, I asked her about Logan. She had now started to grow really suspicious each time Logan came up in our conversations.
Did he love his Nana too?
He loved her, sure, but he never showed it until it was too late. She was trying to listen to some country song when I had asked her about it, so she seemed more distracted than usual.
My best belief is that he felt so guilty about not giving Amelia his time of the day that he volunteered to care for me on his own.
Right, I replied. That was something new. I hadn't imagined that.
Is something going on between you two?
She asked.
I don't think so. He is a nice boy,
she said. I guess. Some days later. I often wondered if Logan was into girls or guys. I'd seen him checking out both, but I wondered if he thought about me in the same way I thought about him. I found him attractive, so much so that I knew, even before I took those "Am I gay?" quizzes, that I liked guys. There was nothing really terrifying about it, not as much as I'd imagined there would be. I believed that was also because of how sex-positive my family was. It made sense that I wanted to be touched by him. I liked him, and it was only natural for me to feel that. It was my Nana who first brought that particular conversation between us. It was still morning, and she'd insisted that she'd rather sleep a little later than wake up anytime soon. Logan was fixing her bed, and I was standing next to her bed with a warm glass of water and her medicine. She had started to look bonier than usual. I talked to my dad yesterday, and when he kept sighing, I started crying. It was almost like he knew what was to come. It was depressing and heartbreaking as hell.
Logan takes care of horses, she said.
I take care of more than one animal, Logan admitted with a smile.
Why don't you take my Simon on a ride, Logan? I do not think he has ever been on a horse. Have you, Simon?
If you don't count wooden horses, then no.
See? Show him the amazing things about our town, Logan. Maybe he'll fall in love with something and live here for the rest of his life, just like you and me.
I will. He first made sure that she'd taken her medicine before she closed the door behind us and let her rest.
Well, do you want to go for a horse ride?
I'd love to, I answered, beaming a little. I didn't. I both hated it and loved it. Nothing scared me more than sitting on a loose horse with a laughing maniac, Logan, right behind me. It was almost like one wrong move and I was going to lose my head. What was worse was the fact that I knew I wouldn't ever fall out of love with this. The feeling was something that I'd never felt before. I fell a little more in love with the town at that moment. When we finally stopped, Logan tied her to a tree and laid a cloth under the shade for us. So, he began, did you like it? My hands were still trembling. I think I enjoyed it. He laughed. Don't worry, you'll come to love it. I fell down on the soft cloth and looked up at the bright sky. Everything here in this part of the world looked brighter and clearer. There was no hurry. While I knew I still enjoyed the hustle-bustle of the city, I couldn't deny the appeal of this kind of environment. It made sense why Logan wanted to stay here, but I was still curious. Doesn't it get a little overwhelming here? He shrugged. He loved doing that a lot. I mean, in a way, yes. Everyone knows everyone here, so it's like a closely knit group. Outsiders aren't easily welcomed here, and people are a bit... He leaned in closer as if to mutter some secret. Racist and conservative. In the 22 years that I've lived here, I have never once thought it to be the most respectable place on the planet. But, honestly, it's not too extreme here. It's doable. In the city, I keep hearing about hate crimes. It's bad. Well, that's one thing you'll not notice here. Well, at least not to that extreme level. Okay, I said. That's good. In comparison, yes. He mirrored my position and looked up at the skies. But there are a lot of good things, too. He pointed at the horse. That's one thing. I agree. I looked at him, and he looked at me. If I hadn't changed the subject, I was sure he would have leaned in. And had he done that, I wouldn't have stopped it. The conversation reached the topic of my Nana. You should inform me immediately if you notice anything wrong, he said. She's still in a recovery stage, so she needs more care than usual. The words really didn't sound ominous, but I couldn't help but ask if I should inform my parents about it. He gave me a useless answer. You know that better than I do. So when we returned and we made sure Nana was all right, I called my parents and updated them about her health. They promised that they'd come by the weekend. I was worried that they'd be a little late, but they promised it would be okay. Nana had gotten seriously ill like this even before, and she'd gotten right back up as if nothing had happened. I would have believed them, but I was living with Nana now, and the loud noises she made while sleeping didn't ease anything in me. On top of it all, I'd started noticing that she had also grown quite sensitive to light stimulations. Switching on the fans irritated her as much as switching it off. At some point, I couldn't deny it anymore. A few days later, it was past 1 a.m. when I woke up to check on my Nana. She had been having restless sleep throughout the day, and the doctor had promised it was because she was old and growing weak. But when I walked into her bedroom and checked in on her, she was wheezing so loudly that it scared me. She had still been sleeping, so I wasn't sure if I should wake her up. But I was scared enough that I immediately called Logan and hoped he wouldn't mind getting up at this hour. Unfortunately, he didn't pick up. I called several times, but he never picked up. Nana's breathing had stabilized a lot in the next 10 minutes, but I was worried enough that I grabbed the first sweater I found and ran out of the house and towards Logan's. I was so upset with him that I wanted to punch him. There were angry tears in my eyes and on my face, and I was so preoccupied by my fear that I didn't even care to wipe them away. When I turned up at his place and rang the bell, a shirtless Logan opened the door. I was not surprised at his state of undress. It was night, and it was summer. He, however, soon regained his senses when he saw my expression, and I was grateful for that. But I still couldn't deny the little shock that passed through me when I noticed a woman standing right behind me. Before I could ask who she was, Logan grabbed something from the table nearby, draped it on his shoulders, and followed me out of there. I was still shocked and worried for my Nana, so it wasn't a surprise that my words were more jumbled than usual around him. But I was glad when upon reaching the house, Logan immediately checked in on her. He announced that she was all right, but it would be better if we brought her to the doctor at the latest. We decided on the morning, and together we stayed awake for the rest of the night. We were sitting in the living room, and I was lying across from Logan. He had been singing some romantic tune when I asked about the woman I had seen at his place. Now that I was sure Nana was all right for now, I couldn't help but let that jealousy grow within me. In the moments of getting close to him, I'd forgotten to ask if he was only into girls or if he was dating someone. Guess I was soon to find that out. "Was she your girlfriend?" I asked. Logan looked at me, but didn't give an answer. I felt so nervous that I couldn't help when I said more. "She was pretty," I nervously added, hoping that it'd ease the tension between us. "Like, really pretty." I knew I was doing a pretty bad job at it. "She's my sister, Lana," Logan finally answered and sat up straighter. "Do you want to kiss me, Simon? Is that it?" An embarrassed blush soon covered my face. "Oh, no, Nana's sick." "So, you will not kiss me because she's sick, not because you don't want it." I believed I did not understand his question. "I don't know?" He got up from his side and came a little closer, only to dip his head to my level and stare right into my soul. He was so close that I couldn't help but think he was going to kiss me. I believed anyone in my position would have felt that. But that didn't mean he was actually going to do that. It was only when he huffed out a small laugh that I realized I'd closed my eyes. I immediately opened them and found his eyes again. I was so embarrassed that I was going to kill myself. "I will go check on your Nana." He stood up straighter. "I have medical knowledge, you know, Simon." "That makes sense," I replied, a little more dazed than I'd like. "You're her caretaker, after all." "Exactly. I'll see her, and then you can call your parents first thing in the morning. We need to let them know." "Okay," I replied. He ran a hand through my head. "You can kiss me, Simon. I don't mind it." "Not now, though. I do not believe this is the right time." That made sense, I thought. A few days later. Nana never really recovered from that sickness. I called my parents the same morning and they arrived in the afternoon. By then, Logan and I had already admitted her to the local hospice. As far as the doctor knew, she was too old for them to actually operate on her, so they gave her some morphine to help with the pain. Otherwise, they let her sleep throughout the day and night. When I asked Logan about Nana, he replied that he knew what was coming. I tried not to think what he meant. The very thought of that ending scared me to death. A few days into it, my parents asked both of us to go home and rest. They wouldn't hear otherwise, so Logan and I decided to stay at Nana's place for the time being. "I hated my Nana for nearly my whole life," Logan began one night. We had been eating dinner when he brought up the topic of his late Nana, but when I saw her on her deathbed, I wondered if my feelings for her could ever be justified. I had been upset at her for a few things, and then I let that feeling fester for longer than necessary. When she died, I couldn't recover from it. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to answer. I did not hate my Nana, but I often avoided spending time in the town. Immature as it sounded of me now, I could not relax with the silence of the town. The difference between the town and the city was jarring, to say the least. It was, however, another thing that I liked here now. In fact, I liked it here more than I'd like to admit. On one of these days, after one of the often repeated conversations between Logan and me, we happened to come closer than we'd planned. One thing led to another, and we ended up kissing on the bed that I'd spent the past few weeks on. Nana and my parents were still in the hospice, so there was really no one to stop us but our guilt. And it hit a little too late. Our hands sneaked here and there, and even before I could understand why I liked Logan's touch more than the priest's daughter, we had stepped into a territory that I wasn't really familiar with. No, we didn't have sex, but what we did might as well pass as it. The guilt soon set in, and we immediately separated. We hugged each other to sleep, but there was a friendly emotion between us. My heart broke at the thought that it would remain like that. The following afternoon, my parents called us and asked us to come see Nana. The doctor had announced that it was likely she'd pass away by the end of the day. And he was right. The evening hadn't even set in when she took her last breath. The funeral was held the following afternoon. Logan and I stood in the corner. At some point, when Logan asked, "How are you feeling?" I didn't even know what to answer. I gave a small reply. "I don't know." "That's okay," he replied. "Take your time." Obviously, my dad was the most devastated. He didn't want to leave Nana behind or her house. So we decided to stay back for a week while my parents' jobs were waiting for them and they couldn't put them on hold anymore. The evening before we had to leave, my dad turned to me and looked at me strangely. "What?" I asked. I was on edge the entire evening. I hadn't met Logan in 2 days, and his sister said that he wasn't doing very well after my Nana's death. "How was she before she, passed away?" It was a sentimental question, so I replied with patience. I told him the good memories and informed him how she'd done a good job at helping me befriend her caretaker. These moments seemed to both relieve him and hurt him. "I wish I was here sooner," he said. "I don't think Nana holds anything against you, Dad." He shrugged. "I don't know." It was my mom who suggested that I should return with them. There would be a slight change in the schedule, and I could spend the rest of the summer picking up some monthly courses for the time being. Instead of answering them, I messaged Logan. I told him that I was to leave the next day. He replied with a simple, "Oh." And I wasn't sure if I was looking too much into it, but that single, simple word sounded so sad that I couldn't help but look into my mom's eyes and tell her that I wanted to spend the rest of the summer in Nana's place. "You don't even know how to cook," she exclaimed. "I will learn," I replied. "From whom?" she asked. "Logan," I replied hesitantly. Not because I was worried how they'd react, but I wasn't really sure if Logan would appreciate me being here. "Oh, I told you, he's gay." "Dad!" I screeched and laughed along with them. Even though I could have said something else, I couldn't help but tell them what I felt for Logan was strangely the absolute best feeling in the world. They smiled as if they knew what I meant. The next day, Mom and Dad had left me with so much money that I wasn't sure what to do with it. When I was sure they'd left, I walked to Logan's place, a little nervous and worried about his reaction. He took his time in answering, but when he opened, I wasn't surprised to find him shirtless. When I asked what he was doing, he told me he was cleaning the dishes. Lana wasn't home, and he invited me in. "You said you were leaving," he said, and returned to his work. I looked around his apartment in wonder. It was no surprise to me that the environment seemed to relax me. "I didn't go," I replied and watched as he cleaned the last one. He washed his hands and turned to me. "I couldn't. I'd reckon you've fallen in love with the town." I looked into his eyes and his windswept hair and the slight sheen of sweat that ran down his cheek, and I thought, well, what do you know? Maybe. "So, you're going to live alone?" "For the entire summer, yes." He smiled, and I felt the oppressing heat around us. I kind of wanted to kiss him, but I instead asked if he was doing well. "I will," he replied. When I didn't say anything, he sighed. "And you can kiss me, you know." So I did. Conclusion: Logan and I made the most out of the rest of my summer vacation. While things got a little heated between us, I couldn't deny that it also helped us deal with Nana's death better. Mom and Dad were happy that I'd finally met someone nice and wouldn't stop asking Logan to come meet them in the city, even though we weren't even boyfriends by then. But at least their support helped. I couldn't be any more glad. The end. Have you ever met someone that you instantly clicked with without really understanding why? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and to stay wholesome.